Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE English Literature. Today we're going to be concentrating on giving you a framework to analyse quotations, where we look to ensure that we cover every single assessment objective. This will help you to structure your paragraphs and therefore better enable you to answer the literature essay questions. Today we're going to focus on an Inspector Goole and specifically on the character of Sheila Birling. So Sheila Birling is one of the key figures in the play, and the reason for this is that she is the one who is most affected by the inspector, and she is the one that changes the most throughout the play. At the start of the play, when we first meet Sheila, she is spoilt, she is typical of an Edwardian woman who is currently under the control of her parents but will soon marry well and become a wife. And she is concerned with and obsessed with money and wealth and looking good. And so when Gerald first hands over the engagement ring, Sheila's response is, "Look, mummy, isn't it a beauty?" Now, what this tells us about Sheila is several things. One, it tells us that she is overly concerned with material things. Two is that she looks for her mother's acceptance. Three is that she's still incredibly childish and naive. So, AO1. Sheila concerned with material things. She is childish and immature. The way we know this is that first of all she draws her mother's attention to the ring. Now, by referring to her mum as mummy, given that she is in her early 20s, suggests that she's childish and therefore that she doesn't understand the world. Her focus on the appearance of the ring means that her concern is not that she's marrying Gerald, but that she's got a nice engagement ring. Now, all of this is typical of that time for that sort of class of woman. So she is fitting Priestley's stereotype of a capitalist young lady. However, as the inspector begins to talk to her more, as she begins to understand more about what's going on, she starts to change her opinions, she starts to change as a person, and she's gone from being incredibly self-centered to suddenly thinking about the world around her. She won't have understood what goes on at her father's factory. She won't have understood what happens to these girls when they're not serving her in some way. And so it is only when the discussion is happening about Mr. Birling sacking Eva Smith that Sheila comes out and says these girls aren't cheap labour, they're people. And so what we can say about Sheila at this point is that she is starting to change. And she is starting to have some empathy. At this point, she still doesn't have any social responsibility. At this point, she is still not actively looking to change the world around her or change her parents, but she is starting to have empathy. She is starting to put herself into the shoes of those girls. However, we still have the use of the word girls, which is belittling in some way. However, she also says that they are people, and this is potentially the first time in the play, apart from the inspector, that they have been recognised as equal. Okay, so changing them from cheap labour to people. This is a thing, this is a person. Okay, so that recognition that they are not just there to line the pockets of the capitalists. AO3, you would relate this to the fact that there were no workers' rights, and therefore businessmen could take advantage. They would pay the lowest wages possible, and ultimately, if people didn't like that, they were free to go and find another job, but jobs were hard to find, and at every point the idea was that you paid the lowest possible amount for wages and charged the highest possible amount for whatever service you had. By the end of the play, Sheila has completely changed her mind about the way they live their life. She is critical of her parents, she is critical of what they've done, and she is starting to show that she recognises that the world needs to change. So at the end, when the Birlings suddenly start patting themselves on the back and thinking that Eva Smith wasn't real, the inspector wasn't real, and therefore they have nothing to feel bad about, Sheila says the point is you don't seem to have learned anything. So by this point, Sheila is completely changed. She is now socially responsible. She is now thinking about how she can have a positive impact on the world. She is also openly critical of her parents, which again would not have been expected at the time, and certainly was not what was happening at the start of the play. So the point is, you don't seem to have learnt anything. So the use of you is accusatory. She is talking to her parents about the fact that they haven't changed, that they haven't developed, that they don't understand that they do have a role to play in this. It is clear from this that the Birlings' only concern was never about Eva Smith, was never about how they had impacted the world, but rather how this could impact their reputation and how this could impact their lives going forward. When she talks about learning, it shows that she has changed and that we all need to change. And therefore, that learning is what should have happened whilst people were watching the play. So as you watch the play, the audience change. If they don't, then we are destined to repeat history. And so we start the play with the inspector as the mouthpiece for Priestley, with the inspector as the one who is teaching us the lesson, and we end the play with Sheila being the one that is trying to teach us the lesson and teach her family the lesson. And without that lesson being learned, the play goes back to the beginning, and we will continue in that cycle until everyone learns their lesson. However, Sheila has gone from being a typical Edwardian woman to now being an advocate of socialism and an advocate of the inspector's message. So if we are going to write that paragraph about how Sheila is presented, we are going to talk about the fact that by the end of the play, Sheila has changed to become a strong character and advocate of change. When she accuses her parents suggests that they haven't learned. She is further enforcing the inspector's point and starting to have her own voice and opinion, showing that she is strong and has changed. Priestley does this to show the audience that they too can change, and to reinforce the message that it is the younger generation who will change the world. So again, we've got all of the assessment objectives in there. That is how we've structured our essay, in the same way that we have unpicked that quotation. And what I'm going to leave you with now is a task that focuses on Sheila. How does Priestley present Sheila? And think about how she changes, how her response to her family changes, and how her response to what is expected in society changes.